By the time I'm writing this, it's been 1455 days since I started using Anki and began learning Japanese. 4 years of ups and downs, emotions all over the place, immersion in progress, and the frustrating stretches where I felt completely stuck. In my 4th year, a lot changed. I actually spent a whole year living in Japan. You'd probably expect that year skyrocketed my Japanese skills to the next level, but honestly, it was the year I most often felt like I wasn't progressing at all. It wasn't the experience I had imagined when I moved there. But I'll get into that later. First, let's take a look at the stats. I officially started learning Japanese on September 25th, 2021. Since then, I've done Anki for 1079 days in a row, and I'm actually pretty proud of that streak. I won't lie, sometimes, pretty often, Anki is a total pain in the ass, but it works and I've stuck with it. So here are the numbers so far. 664,135 reviews. This makes an average per day of 450 cards, with a total study time in Anki of 957 hours. It's kind of awesome, and also a little bit depressing to think about how much time I've spent in this one app. But in the end, this is the backbone of my Japanese journey. My current mature card rate is 75%, which isn't perfect, but I'm happy with it. Over the years, that percentage has bounced between 70 and 80%, but now it seems to have settled right in the middle. And finally, the big one. I've learned 17,751 cards, with over 20,000 cards created in my deck. Thanks to my fixation on spreadsheets and the habit of tracking nearly everything I did in Japanese, I've built a pretty good overview of how I spent my time. The only exception is my last year in Japan, where I stopped tracking immersion seriously, but again, I'll come back to that. I started out with a combination of RTK, Anki and anime. During those first weeks when I was going through Tango N5 and RTK and watching anime, I couldn't understand a single thing. Maybe I caught a word here and there, but that was it. My ears had to get used to Japanese as a sound system. Even the boundaries between words were unclear. It took longer than expected until I could unconsciously hear where one word ended and another began. But as I said, back in the day, I didn't track immersion properly, but I would estimate I was doing 2 or 3 hours a day. Not bad considering I still had a full-time job. And here's the thing, I want to be transparent, because when you watch this video, I don't want you comparing yourself unfairly. My situation at the end of 2021 can't really be compared to someone juggling a full-time job, family or other commitments. Because I fell in love with Japanese and because I absolutely hated my job, I quit by the end of 2020. I had already sent out my application to study Japanese at my local university, and while the process took longer than expected, I eventually entered in October 2022. During that gap year, I lived off my savings and studied Japanese all day, every day. Of course, I still spent time with my family, watched movies nearly every night, and played games. But still, I think I averaged 5 to 8 hours a day of Japanese for months on end. So, back to the numbers. According to my logs, I've spent 475 hours reading. I finished 32 books and I'm currently reading 3 at the same time. Then I watched 548 hours of anime, which are around 1400 episodes including the movies. Then I watched 128 hours of Japanese TV shows, which are roughly 130 episodes. Followed by 955 hours of gaming in Japanese, where I finished 22 games and I'm currently playing 3 at the same time. And finally, I finished 77 volumes of manga, which are maybe roughly 100 hours total, but I never really tracked this properly, to be honest. All tracked hours combined with Anki add up to 3,163 hours of Japanese. If I include the untracked hours, classes in Germany and Japan, endless conversations, YouTube videos, podcasts, I'd estimate I've already crossed the 5,000 hour mark. Of course, that's just a guess. The only solid number is over 3,000. This sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. Some people spend far more time on their favorite game without thinking even about it. If you do the math, 3,163 hours divided by 1,455 equal 2.17 hours per day. So yes, it's consistent effort, but it's not superhuman. It's doable. And if we compare it with the JLPT study hour comparison data from 2010 until 2015, I've already entered the N1 bracket just based on tracked time. Of course, the N1 isn't a perfect measure of proficiency, but it's still encouraging. I plan to take the test in 2026 or maybe 2027, mostly as a checkpoint. At the end of the day, continuing to learn Japanese for 4 straight years is a feat in itself. It's not just about discipline, it's about intrinsic motivation. External goals, expectations, or pressure aren't enough to sustain something like this. It has to come from within. But why did I even start learning Japanese? And that's a question I, at the beginning, often ask myself. And the truth is, there isn't one single answer. As a child, I was already fascinated by Japan, the culture, anime, and the atmosphere of Japan. The fascination never left me, but I never seriously considered learning Japanese until COVID-19 hit. Suddenly, I was working from home, and my personal and professional life blurred into one. I ended up working way too much, from morning until late night, because my desk and my bed were in the same room. I needed something new, a hobby, an escape. That's how Japanese entered my life. At first I bought Japanese from Zero Book 1 and worked through half of it. I realized that I really liked the language but not the textbook approach. It wasn't bad, but it felt rigid and uninspiring. Around that time I discovered Matt vs Japan on YouTube, who introduced me to immersion learning, and that completely shifted my approach. Now, 4 years later, I feel comfortable in Japanese. I can have conversations, read books, watch movies, play games, all in this one language. But more importantly, Japanese gave me something bigger than skills. It gave me new connections, new worldviews, and access to works of art I never could have experienced otherwise. Not filtered through translation or adaptation, but as they were meant to be. That, to me, is the most valuable outcome of all. So even though my output and understanding has improved drastically over the years, I'd say that I'm still far away from being native. There are still moments where I completely miss the point of what's being said, or where I need to reread the passage 3 times to fully get it. I'm not beating myself up about it anymore. Early on, every time I felt to understand something, I felt like it was proof that I wasn't progressing. Now I see it as proof that I'm still in the middle of the journey. Living in Japan for 1 year made that brutally clear. On the one hand, I was surrounded by Japanese all the time. On the other hand, my daily life didn't always give me the kind of immersion I had imagined. Sure, I was speaking Japanese every day in shops, at university and with friends, but it wasn't the experience I had pictured back in 2021. I dealt with bureaucratic struggles. I had classes in Japanese that were way below my level, and more often than not, I came home drained instead of inspired. It was humbling in a way. Instead of skyrocketing forward, I often felt like I was stuck in the mud, repeating the same routine again and again. But maybe that's exactly what progress looks like when you're past the beginner stage. It's less about the big leaps and more about the small, almost invisible steps that only make sense when you zoom out over months or years. And here's the thing, even if I still feel far from native, I'm no longer worried about that gap. I know I'll keep going. I know that if I study for another 1,500 days, if I keep reading, watching, listening and speaking, the native line will get closer. Maybe I'll never fully cross it, but it doesn't matter. But it's funny, I started out chasing fluency, chasing the idea of mastering Japanese or being like a native or being native. But what I really gained was something else entirely. I gained a habit, 4 years of doing something every single day, no matter how small. That alone changed how I see, gives me a sense of connection that translations will never capture. And maybe, most importantly, I gained patience. Learning Japanese forced me to accept that real progress isn't glamorous. It's repetition, frustration, long dry distances, and then suddenly, one day, realizing you understood a pun or caught a nuance in a book that you would have missed last year. That slow accumulation is, in itself, kind of beautiful. But now, before we talk about what might be coming in the future, let's talk about what I'm doing right now. My normal day starts with me waking up relatively early. I make myself a coffee, start the computer, and then I do Anki. During those 4 years where I did Anki every day, this was my go-to routine, and I still think that personally, finishing Anki as a first thing after waking up is best for me. So I started doing the same routine again after starting Anki again. Japanese-wise, as I stopped watching anime roughly 2 years ago, I still focus on reading books, and now, since I'm back in Germany, I'm shifting my focus also more to playing games in Japanese. A week ago I started reading a new book, which is without a doubt the most difficult book that I've ever tried to read. Yet, since I started learning Japanese, I always preach that comprehensible input is really important and the founding stone of language gains, but never ever at the cost of enjoyment and motivation. Sure, I could read a book where I understand more, where maybe there's just one unknown word every few pages, but my motivation to read and understand this book is much higher than the desire to now read something more relaxing. When I want to relax or I have read for at least an hour every day, I play some games in Japanese. A few weeks ago I started playing Metafore Fantasio, which is great, but sometimes it feels like work. So I searched for another game, And 1 week ago, while doom scrolling through my Steam library, I've decided on a whim to try Witcher 3 in Japanese. To be honest, this isn't the first time I've tried playing Witcher 3, but the previous attempts were utter disasters. I couldn't understand anything. But this time it's different. Of course, I still encounter some words that I don't know here and there. This happens especially when I look at the quest boards or read through the bestiary. Other than that, I'd say that at least for the first 10 to 15 hours, Witcher 3 is now not really that different for me if I played in English, German or Japanese. So, every day I use Anki, read for at least an hour and then play some games in Japanese. If I have more time or I want to mix things up, I sometimes watch YouTube videos such as Ekogo or Ushizawa. Oh, and before I forget, my wife and I are also currently playing Death Stranding and the new Silent Hill together in Japanese. So, as you can see, Japanese plays a huge role in my daily life, but where does it leave me now? I'm sitting here 1455 days in with over 3000 tracked hours, probably 5000 if we're being generous with estimates. I'm comfortable in Japanese but not satisfied. I know I'll keep immersing, keep playing, keep reading, keep adding to Anki even when it annoys the hell out of me. And as I said, I'll probably take the N1 in 2026 or maybe 2027. But not because I need the certificate, but because it feels like closing a chapter. A symbolic checkpoint. But beyond that, the goal isn't really a test anymore. The goal is simply to keep going, to keep building a life where Japanese is just there, naturally, every day. And maybe one day I'll look back at these X days and laugh at how much I obsessed over numbers. Or maybe I'll go back and be grateful that I tracked them, because there'll be a record of the slow climb I made, one review, 1 hour, or 1 page at a time. Either way, I know this isn't the end. It's just another checkpoint in a much longer story. And then finally, for the closing thoughts, welcome to the channel or thank you for sticking with me all the way to the end of this video. I honestly don't know if this will be the start of a series of videos or if it might be the only one for a while. Either way, I wanted to sit down and share my journey, my perspective, and maybe inspire someone out there to start chasing their own goals. I've also been thinking about what kind of content could actually bring value to you, or to YouTube. One idea is to make progress updates, but also create reviews of books, games, and shows I've finished or played in Japanese. Not just reviews in the normal sense, but talking about what the work itself is about, what I learned from it as a person, but what I picked up from it as a Japanese learner and how difficult it was to consume depending on the medium. Basically a mix of personal growth, language learning, and media review. So, what do you think? Would you be interested in that kind of content or no? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, a like and subscribe would mean a lot to me. Thanks again for watching, and maybe we'll see each other in the next one.